Thank you for joining us here on KENS 5 News at 10. Our top story tonight, an act of kindness leads to a deadly betrayal after police say the man accused of killing his roommate walked up to officers the very next day and confessed.
He shot his friend dead, walked out of that backyard, and cracked open a beer, not running, not hiding, not even looking over his shoulder. Just a man and his drink, like nothing happened. Like he hadn't just put multiple bullets into the person who gave him a place to sleep. Girl, we need to talk about this one. In every home, behind every closed door, there's a story waiting to be uncovered. Welcome to Dark Whispers, where we dive deep into the hidden truths of domestic crime and the relationships that turn deadly. If you're drawn to real stories, powerful insights, and the shadows most people avoid, you're in the right place. Subscribe now and step into the whispers they never wanted you to hear. This is the story of David Rodriguez Cabrera, and before we get into what happened to him, you need to understand who he was, because who he was is the whole reason this story hurts the way it does. People who knew David will tell you the same thing, every single time, without hesitation. He was happy. Not surface-level happy. Not fake it till you make it happy. Genuinely, consistently, from the inside out happy. The kind of man who started every morning with his Bible. The kind of man who moved through life with this quiet, unshakable belief that people were worth something, even the ones the world had already given up on. His girlfriend Edith saw it up close. Every single day she watched this man look at broken people and see something everyone else had stopped looking for. Potential, worth, a reason to try. He used to tell her, never judge people for who they are, because the only one who can judge you is God. Now let me tell you something. That is a beautiful way to live. It really is. The kind of thinking that makes the world a little softer, a little more human, but it is also the kind of thinking that can make a person dangerously trusting. Because David did not just say those words, he lived them. Every day, out loud, with his door wide open, and living them is exactly what led him to invite Julio Castro into his home. Julio Castro was David's friend, and about 6 months before any of this happened, David saw his friend struggling. Not just going through a rough patch, struggling, deep in the grip of drugs and alcohol, heading somewhere bad, and heading there fast. So David did what David always did. He opened his door. He brought Castro to live with him, not because anyone asked him to, not because he owed him anything, because he genuinely did not want to watch his friend lose himself completely to that life. He wanted to be the reason his friend found a way back. Period. That is who David was. Now, Edith. She had feelings about this. She was not fully comfortable with the arrangement from the jump. Something in her wasn't settled about it. But David had this way of making you believe in people the way he did. This quiet, convincing, almost contagious kind of faith. And so Castro moved in. For 6 months, these two men shared a home. 6 months of meals, of shared space, of David trying to be a lifeline for someone who was drowning. 6 months. And then one Friday afternoon, it all fell apart. The witness. Now, while Edith was trying to process the worst moment of her life, investigators were not standing still. A witness in the area had heard those 5 shots and stepped outside to see what was going on. And what they saw stopped them cold. Julio Castro, David's friend, David's roommate, the man David had opened his home to for 6 months, was leaving, walking away from the property right after those shots rang out. The witness recognized him immediately. This was not a stranger passing through. This was someone connected to that house, someone people knew. So now investigators had a name. And they had something else, too. The footage cameras from a nearby business had been rolling the whole time. And what those cameras captured, girl, what those cameras captured is the part of this story that is going to sit with you. Because you might expect to see a man running, panicking, falling apart after doing something that cannot be undone. You might expect to see guilt, some version of it at least, playing out on his face or in the way he moved. That is not what the footage showed. What investigators saw when they reviewed that surveillance footage was Julio Castro walking away from that backyard, calmly, with a beer in his hand, drinking it, finishing it, like he had just stepped away from a cookout and not from the body of the friend who had taken him in off the streets. He walked to the front of the home, tossed the beer can, and left. Anyways, let that sink in for a second. No panic, no rush, no looking back, just a man, a beer, and a walk down the street like it was any other Friday afternoon. Make it make sense. The missing piece. But investigators did not stop there. They went back through that footage looking for more, looking for the moments before the shots, looking for whatever triggered this. And what they found, or rather, what they did not find, raised even more questions. Because the cameras did not show a fight, no argument spilling out into the open, no visible struggle between the two men. No moment where things clearly escalated to the point where someone ends up dead. David and Castro were together in that backyard, and then shots were fired. That was it. That was all the footage gave them, which meant the full picture of what actually happened in that backyard. What was said, what broke, what made Julio Castro pick up a weapon and shoot the man who had been keeping him off the streets. That picture was still missing. Oh, so now investigators needed answers. And those answers were only going to come from one place: the surrender. But here is the thing. They did not have to look for very long. Because the very next day, while officers were out responding to a completely unrelated call, a man walked up to them, flagged them down, introduced himself. It was Julio Castro. He told officers he had done something while he was under the influence of narcotics. Said he wanted to turn himself in. Let me tell you something. After the calm walk, after the beer, after an entire night of whatever he was doing while David's family was getting the worst phone call of their lives, after all of that, now he wanted to come clean. I said what I said. When news of David's death spread through the community, the people who knew him did not talk about what happened to him the way you might expect. They did not lead with anger, though the anger was there. They led with who he was, because who he was felt too important to let get buried under the details of how he died. His girlfriend Edith spoke about him the way you speak about someone whose absence leaves a shape in the room, a specific, irreplaceable shape that nothing else can fill. She talked about his faith, his consistency, the way he showed up for people, not because it was convenient, but because he genuinely believed it was the right thing to do. And she talked about Julio Castro, about the fact that David had seen something worth saving in that man, had brought him in. That is the part that is hardest to sit with. Not just that David was killed, but that he was killed by the very person he was trying to help, by someone who had eaten at his table, slept under his roof, been carried by David's belief in him for 6 solid months. But hey, David knew who he was, and he lived that way right up until the end.
Edith Nava says her boyfriend, 36-year-old David Rodriguez Cabrera, wanted to help a friend by letting him live with him. But that kindness led to Cabrera's death.
Friday afternoon, police were called out to South San Agustin near South General McMullen for a shooting where multiple callers said they heard 5 bullets. When police arrived, they found 36-year-old David Rodriguez Cabrera lying on the sidewalk in front of the home. David's girlfriend, Edith Nava, says when she got home from work, David's body was already covered up.
Me sentí muy triste.
I felt very sad because I couldn't say goodbye to him. I couldn't see him. I didn't see him at all. Investigators say a witness went outside after hearing the shots and saw 36-year-old Julio Castro leaving the home where the shots were fired and recognized Castro because he lived with David. Police say surveillance video from a nearby business confirmed the witness's story. Fast forward to Saturday, police say while responding to another call, the suspect told officers he had done something while using drugs and wanted to turn himself in. Investigators say that something was the shooting death of his friend, David Rodriguez Cabrera. David's girlfriend says he let Castro live with him about 6 months ago.
Le gustaba ayudar siempre a las personas.
He always liked helping people, and he even brought that friend to live with him to help him out because he didn't want his friend to lose himself to drugs and alcoholism. When Castro was brought in for questioning, police say Castro told conflicting stories and had a bus ticket to Dallas in his pocket. Investigators then charged Castro with murder. Police say they don't know what led up to the shooting. David's girlfriend says he was always happy, religious, loved to read the Bible, and used to say enjoy life and live in the moment because life can be gone in an instant. She was also concerned about Castro living with David.
Él siempre decía que no.
He always used to say that we should never judge people for who they are, because the only one who can judge you is God.
Castro is currently in the Bexar County Jail with a $250,000 bond. David's girlfriend is now asking for prayers so David can rest in peace. Now, a plate sale will be taking place next Saturday, June 27th, to help with burial costs.
What this leaves behind here is what we are left with after all of it. A man who read his Bible every morning is gone. A woman who watched her boyfriend extend grace to someone she was never fully comfortable with is now living with that grief every day and never even got to say goodbye. A community is sitting with a loss that did not have to happen. And Julio Castro, the man David pulled off the street, the man David housed and fed and believed in for 6 months, is sitting in a cell. Now, the question of what actually broke in that backyard on that Friday afternoon, what was said, what happened in those final moments between two men who were supposed to be friends, that question still does not have a clean answer. The cameras did not catch a fight. Castro said he was under the influence of narcotics, but none of that explains it. Not really. Because explanation and understanding are two different things. And some things, no matter how many details you have, you are just never going to fully understand. Period. Edith's words. But what stays with me, what I keep coming back to in this case, is Edith. Because Edith did not just lose her boyfriend. She lost him without warning, without a chance to prepare, without even a moment to hold his hand before he was gone. She found out at work. She came home to a crime scene. She stood on the outside of that tape and looked at a covered body and had to somehow keep breathing. She said, "I felt very sad because I couldn't say goodbye to him. I couldn't see him. I didn't see him at all." That is it. That is the whole weight of this story sitting in 2 sentences. No dramatic last words. No final conversation. No closure of any kind. Just here one moment and gone the next, and the person left behind has to figure out how to carry that. Girl, I need a second. David Rodriguez Cabrera was not a perfect man. None of us are. But he was a good one. A genuinely, consistently, from the inside out good one. He believed that broken people deserved grace. He believed that his door being open could be the thing that changed someone's life. He believed that judgment belonged to God and not to him. And he lived every single one of those beliefs. Fully, out loud, without hesitation. Moving on is hard when a story ends like this one, because there is no clean resolution that makes it make sense. There is no outcome that feels like enough. There is just a man who gave everything he had to give, and a loss that his community, and the woman who loved him will be carrying for a very long time. Rest easy, David. And to Edith, and everyone who loved him, we see you.